Have you ever been woken up frantically by your son on a Saturday morning because Fortnite doesn't work and your wireless router has melted? Well, I have, and today I'm going to tell you how I fixed it. Hi, this is Andrew from T is for Tech, and I don't know about you, but this did really happen to me. It was a couple weeks ago, and I had been up late on a Friday night. Everything was good in the house, and Saturday morning I woke up and my son was standing right next to me, and he's like, Dad, Fortnite doesn't work. I can't get online. I can't, the Xbox not connecting to the internet. And then about 10 seconds later, my wife is telling me like, hey, I can't control the ecobee temperature with my phone. What's going on? And so right away, my first inclination is to say, oh, it's probably Comcast, or we have Comcast Xfinity cable internet, and they're down a lot, and I figured like, oh crap, they're down again. So I came downstairs to my office area, and I took a look at the cable modem, and it showed I had a connection. So I rebooted it. Just in case, and nothing happened. And then I thought, oh, well, maybe it's the router, so let me reboot the router. And I had at the time, it was an Asus Dark Night router. I can't remember the model, N66 something. So it was a few years old. I want to say potentially 3 or 4 years old. So, and it was solid. It had worked fine for a long time, but something was totally wrong, right? So it was not working. The lights were flashing. The power light kept flashing a little bit. So I tried to reset that. I rebooted it. I reset it again, like to factory. Tried to reset it to factory, the factory settings, and something totally got messed up with the firmware, and I couldn't even get into the menu to update the firmware or anything. So after about 2 or 3 hours of screwing around with it, I just kind of gave up. And, in my head, I thought, oh, this is great, because not great, but gives me an opportunity to get something else, right? Because it was a few years old, and I had some problems with it. Especially with coverage in my house. I had the main Asus router in the basement, and then I had an extended, another router upstairs, and we have like 3 floors in our house. On the top floor, I had another router up there that was acting as kind of like an access point to the network. So it was the same SSID, and I didn't have like a wired way. Our house doesn't have Ethernet wiring, so I used a power line adapter, like a 1,000 megabytes per second power line adapter from the basement router to the upstairs router, and it worked pretty well. It didn't get anywhere near 1,000 megabytes a second, and so basically there was a lot of lag in the house, right? And then I had problems with a device attaching itself, kind of connecting to the upstairs Wi-Fi unit, and then when you came downstairs, it wouldn't want to release and kind of flip over to the other one, so you always ended up with crappy signal throughout the house. So long story short, I wasn't super happy with the way that things were set up anyways, and I just didn't it worked, and I didn't want to just spend money to spend money. But in the back of my head, I always thought something like I would look at something like the Google Mesh WiFi system. And that's what I actually intended to do. I actually intended to I went to Best Buy because it was a crisis, right? I couldn't order anything offline. I was going to go to the store and pick something up so I can fix the Fortnite, meltdown in my house, and everyone, freaking out that nothing works. So I did go to Best Buy, and I was looking at the 3-pack of the Google Wi-Fi, and then I got to talking to somebody that worked at Best Buy, and for the first time probably ever that I was there, I talked to somebody that actually knew what they were talking about, which is surprising, right? I don't know. Maybe everybody else has better experiences with, knowledgeable salespeople at Best Buy, but I've always had problems. So, and I was looking at this, and I just basically was like, yeah, I'm gonna get this, right? There was a 3-pack, and it was like what I thought would work for my house. And then the guy, the salesman, basically said, hey, look, I had the Google Wi-Fi mesh in my house, and I got rid of it, and I bought an Eero system. And I was like, what? Eero? What's Eero? And actually, I had never seen this before. I know I've heard a little bit about it. Just, kind of one of those, it's a startup, and it's another, wireless kind of company starting up and building this hardware. And, I just really hadn't researched it enough, right? I haven't researched anything, right? My default thing was just like, hey, I'm just going to go get a Google thing because I've heard people say that that's great. So I went in with that intention to get the Google wireless, and then kind of got talked into, and I wouldn't say talked into, I was basically educated on how the Eero works. And then I thought, hey, I might as well try it. If it doesn't work, I can always return it and then go back to the Google one, right? And it was super easy to set up, and I didn't have time to record the unboxing of it or the actual setup of the device in my house. But it took me about 10-15 minutes to set up. And I basically put one in the basement and then one in the same place upstairs in my house. And I had thought I might need 3 because my house is about 2,700 square feet. But I didn't. 2 were fine. And they have a super strong connection between them, and it all works awesome. And so I guess the main difference between this and something like the Google Wi-Fi is in the available channels for basically the wireless backhaul between the devices. So that's mainly, I think, the difference in that. Well, I can't find where that is. And I bought the Eero Pro, which is basically 2 of these devices, and they look like this. I mean, they're pretty small. It basically has 2 Ethernet jacks on the back, USB-C, and a power cable, or a power button. And so what I did is I set this up in my basement. I plugged one of them in, one of the Ethernet ports into the cable modem, which I'm running in bridge mode. And then I plugged the other one into a 10-port Linksys or Netgear switch, so that because I can have a bunch of wired stuff in the basement. So I plugged one of these into a switch, one into the internet, and then upstairs I basically plugged. I have a Samsung SmartThings hub, so I plugged that into it, and then I also plugged my son's Xbox into it because it's in the same room as the Xbox. And yeah, I mean, it works awesome. Yeah, and this is what I was saying. So it's it has tri-band Wi-Fi radios, and it broadcasts a simultaneous 2.4 gigahertz and 5.2 gigahertz network. So you can basically on my other router, my Asus router, I had basically my wireless, and then I had another wireless network that was the 5 gigahertz network. So you had to kind of, switch between them or whatever, pick one. And that didn't really work so well. So this is nice because it broadcasts basically one SSID, and then the devices will connect at whatever speed they can connect at and negotiate with the router, which is nice, right? So you have automatic, basically, ability to pick the higher frequency and higher speed bands. And then the 5.8 gigahertz wireless is, from what I understand, the frequency that they use for doing the wireless backhaul between the devices. And that seems to be super fast, right? If I go to, say, Xfinity speed test, so if I go to the speed test site, any computer in my house basically now will get like the pretty much the full speed of my connection. And I pay for 150 megabytes a second connection to Comcast. That's kind of like what I can get in my area. And I'm typically getting between 176 and 180 down and about 12-ish up, depending on time of day and all of that sort of thing. And I can do this on any of the computers in my house, right? So my wife's computer, my daughter's got a Mac upstairs, and they're all connected wirelessly. And even connected to the the upstairs Eero, they're getting these same speeds from the internet on those devices. So it's really pretty good. And I never had this in my house before. It was always super slow. My daughter got crappy speeds in her room, and it was always laggy. And I just was pulling my hair out because I really didn't know what to do in order to improve that. And this just magically solved all my problems. Another thing my wife had complained about to me in the past was we have a shared Synology NAS drive in our house, and she would copy pictures from that and browse pictures on that, and that's kind of where we use to store all of our digital pictures. And that was always slow, right? Because she was kind of over the Wi-Fi, and it was just slow. And this just has kind of supercharged that because she has just like a super fast connection, and she has a 5 gigahertz network card. I forgot which one, what version, AC, whatever, in there, and it connects to the basement and into the Synology like super fast. So honestly, this thing just really is awesome. It works great, and but I have about 28 to 30 devices connected in my house, and some of those are wireless security cameras, Apple TV, multiple MacBooks, wireless printers, phones. My kids have phone, my wife has a phone, I have a couple phones. So we have a ton of stuff on the network, and there's no lag, there's no problems. It just works. So it's really cool, really nice. One of the other things I really like about it is that the automatic updates, and you can basically see it on your phone and just say, hey, there's an update for your router. Do you want to download it and reset or restart the network? And it will do that. It takes 10-15 minutes. I've already done that once. There's been an update, and basically, your Wi-Fi system constantly updates, which is nice. It's much nicer and easier than the way my Asus router worked, where I had to go and it tell you there was a firmware update, but you'd have to log into the web UI for it and download it and do a bunch of stuff and reboot it. And this is just more seamless. The one thing I would say though is it's not as feature rich as, say for instance, a like another type of router, right? One of the ones where it has a VPN built in, or like quality of service settings, or more advanced gateway routing type stuff, and like whatever, like LAN, WAN, a bunch of different things there. I would say for the most part it's very basic. You can do port forwarding, you can do static IP addresses internal to your network, right? So you can do IP reservations, and I've done that a little bit so I can remotely access some of my cameras. So I did port forwarding on a couple different ports, 80, 81, 80, 81, 80, 80, so that I can hit those access point, or those cameras from the internet. And I have a domain set up on Google Domains that I am running internally, dynamic DNS, so that I can hit the router with a domain name. So I have it all set up, and it works fine with the Eero, and because I had it set up the same way with the Asus router. So for basic stuff like that, I think it's pretty solid, and it works. And I honestly, I would give up some of the things like the VPN, and I'll just run a VPN server internally on a Mac that I have here, or you can run Linux on a Raspberry Pi and stick that behind there, or do whatever, right? There's other alternatives to some of those features that are built into other routers just by running something on another device in your house. so I don't really care that much. But honestly, the trade-offs are totally worth it. Just the fact that the wireless is so rock solid and fast. I mean, it's fast. It's fast, and it kind of fixed all my connection problems. Well, that's all I got for this video. I hope it was a little bit helpful in kind of understanding my thought process in selecting the Eero and some of my initial experience with it in my house. It's definitely, I think, a good option if you're looking for a mesh wireless system for yourselves. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.